Well, good morning, and welcome to SMU Journalism for Becoming the Ultimate Freelancer, another professional development workshop that we're hosting here at SMU Journalism and is sponsored and developed by the PressClub Dallas. I'd be remiss not to point out that the guy who got the ball rolling for this workshop, Alan Manning, the assignments editor for CBS 11, is sidelined with an upper respiratory infection this morning. And so he figured he wouldn't do us any favors by coming, but he was an immense help in putting this together and securing a number of the panelists. And he's watching on the live blog. So he's here with us in spirit. Speaking of the live blog, wanted to mention a few housekeeping matters. So in addition to taping it, we have some of our SMU journalism students who are live blogging the proceedings, and then we also have a PressClub SMU hashtag as well. So if you'd like to follow along with the live blog on the daily campus, the short link is j.mp/ultimate-live-blog, all one word. Very humble, I know, but it's called the Ultimate Freelancer, so we figured Ultimate Live Blog was a good short link. And that should take you to the daily campus live blog. And if you want to contribute to that live blog, tweets with the hashtag PressClubSMU, all one word, will automatically feed into the live blog as you see happening right now. So that's the kind of the social media housekeeping. Computers, it looks like you're all, if you're in front of a computer and you're trying to log on and you haven't yet, the login is CCJN, which is the prefix for all of our courses here in the journalism division. Wi-Fi, guest Wi-Fi network. Donnie, I still need to get you. I'll do that here in a minute. But SMU 1911 is the guest Wi-Fi network, and it should prompt you on how to sign up for that. Restrooms, we have one restroom in our kind of dressing room area there for our studio in the corner. And then we actually have a number of other restrooms down the hall on the other side of the Humphrey Lee building. And we have several student volunteers who can help point you there if need be. So it's just one toilet in this restroom here, but then there's several down. So during the breaks, ask a student or a faculty member, and we can point you there. And then food and drink, of course, we've got coffee and breakfast wraps and pastries from Jason's Deli. So please feel free to get up and move around and enjoy some refreshments during our program today as well. So Alan, as ever prepared as Alan is, actually prepared some opening remarks, and I'm not going to go entirely by his script, but I did want to point out that Alan said it is only fitting that we are gathered here on the 177th anniversary of Texas independence to recognize those who strike out on their own independence. You guys. So the theme is independence today, and in that keeping, we want to arm you with the latest tools and knowledge to help maintain your financial freedoms. Because with the rapidly changing marketplace and new advances in technology, freelancers are faced with new challenges beyond just what the next assignment's going to be. And so this seminar we think is going to benefit current and future freelancers. We have 8 or 9 SMU journalism students here, some of whom are already freelancing and some of whom are about to graduate and soon will be freelancing. But we've got 3 sessions today covering the skills and technology, the legal and ethical issues, and the financial considerations that can spell success. And what I'd add to that is someone who, I'm an assistant professor here at SMU Journalism. I teach digital journalism, and I'm really excited this semester am co-teaching a media entrepreneurship class with our O'Neill Chair in Business Journalism, Mark Bamos. And in both of those classes, I stress repeatedly a theme that I really believe to my core, and that is that there's never been more ways to shape your own destiny and take control of your own journalistic career. Online publishing provides more ways than ever to sell your professional storytelling skills, and also gives you more ways than ever to circulate your work, through the power of the web and social media, increasingly mobile devices. And so our panelists today come from a variety of backgrounds, from the worlds of journalism, public relations, content marketing, social media, the legal community, but in one way or another, they're all taking advantage of this exciting era of opportunity. It's a really empowering era for freelancers. You've never had more options to get work than you have today. So, but before we introduce our panelists and get to our first panel, I want to take a little informal poll here and just kind of see who's who. So we'd like to know if you could just raise your hand if you fit this type of background. Who here is a professional with mostly a newspaper background? Okay, looks like 8 to 10. Okay. Anybody with mostly a TV background, professional TV background? We're getting some. Okay, not so much. Okay. Public relations background. Okay, a good handful there. And anybody from the marketing or advertising worlds mainly? Okay, we've got some back there. So we've got, and then students, raise your hands. So, yay! So these are some of our best and brightest, many of which are going to be graduating. So, and they showed up at 9 o'clock on a Saturday morning when some of their friends might be a little hungover, but they're here. So way to go, you guys. So there's kind of a little overview. It looks like we are the PressClub Dallas, and therefore there's a natural inclination toward the newspaper side of things, but looks like we've got a really good mix of different fields. All right, so without further ado, let's go ahead and launch into our first panel, because some of them have freelance assignments to go out and cover today, so we don't want to keep them too long. But we've got a great first panel here. Actually, all three of our panelists in the first session come from a newspaper background originally, but they're all doing different, interesting, multi-platform things now. We have Sarah Bahari, who is a freelance writer with more than a decade of experience in journalism, writing, editing, and public relations. I first met Sarah when she was working for the Fort Worth Star-Telegram. She came out and talked to my classes at the University of North Texas, where I used to teach. But Sarah worked for the Fort Worth Star-Telegram for many years, and then moved on to University Public Relations at the University of North Texas. And she now writes for numerous media outlets, universities, and nonprofit organizations and private companies. And so Sarah actually has a freelance assignment today to go to and a night cop shift to cover for the Fort Worth Star-Telegram. So she's staying busy. So we have Sarah. We also have Mike Drago, who's the Vice President of Content at Idea Grove, which is a content marketing company here in Dallas. Mike is my former boss. He had a long career with leading news organizations, including the Dallas Morning News, where he was city editor, and covered all kinds of things, was responsible for coverage of breaking news, investigative stories, special projects. He built a team of education reporters that won all kinds of state and national accolades, and oversaw coverage of Texas and the Southwest during Hurricanes Katrina and Rita. And Mike just recently made the transition into the world of content marketing. He's going to talk about that. An interesting thing about that is, I think a lot of journalists don't realize, this is another thing I emphasize to my students, that you have marketable skills. The ability to tell stories and be curious and write well on deadline is not a skill set that only translates to mainstream media. It translates to this growing world of content marketing, and that's what Mike's going to talk to us about. And then Kim Ritson-Taylor-Leeson is here with us as well. She's a professional photographer, also formerly at the Dallas Morning News, but her clients have also included People Magazine, the New York Times, the Washington Post, and a wide array of industrial, educational, and corporate publications. She freelances a lot for SMU. We see her a lot here on campus, and she's won numerous awards from the Texas Headliners Foundation, Texas APME, and the Association for Women Journalists. So I've asked the three speakers to come up with about 10 minutes of opening comments and then lead to questions and answers. And we're just going to go in alphabetical order. And the first person is Sarah Bahari. So Sarah, can you please just come up and don't feel confined to the podium, although you can stay here if you want. But we're really interested to know about your journey from full-time newspapers to all the juggling that you're doing. Okay.
Hi.
Hi.
Morning.
Morning.
Well, like Jake said, I'm a freelance writer now, and let me start by saying that deciding to become a freelance writer was by far the hardest decision I've ever made. So if you're thinking about it, and I know what you're going through, and if you've already done it, congratulations. Freelancing had always been this pie-in-the-sky ultimate dream for me that I never actually thought would happen because I needed money. But after I had a baby in 2010, I started wondering if maybe I could make it happen somehow, but I had no idea how it would work, how I would find clients, how I would avoid poverty. Then my old paper, the Star-Telegram, which I'd left a few years earlier, heard I was thinking about giving freelance writing a try, and they made me an offer. They said, what if we can give you a set number of freelance hours every week, and then you can find whatever other clients that you can. And so then I really started thinking about it, wondering if this could work. And I still couldn't make the decision, so I spent Christmas 2010 crying in my in-laws' house in Oklahoma. And finally I just decided that if I didn't make the jump now, I never would. So I decided to become a freelance writer, and it turned out to be the best decision that I ever made. I'd just like to share a few of the things I've learned in the last couple of years with you. First, like Jake said, recognize that writing has value. It's really important, and not everyone can do it even reasonably well. I recently had a freelance assignment for a publication rewriting corporate submissions, and I was blown away by how awful the writing was. I mean, there were random exclamation marks, random commas, and it just, and these were people with college degrees. So just recognize that clean, descriptive, good writing really is needed more than ever, I think. Reach out to everyone you know or have ever met. Journalists and PR people really like helping each other, I have found. And one of the only good things to come from newspaper, the current economy of newspapers, is that journalists have found jobs all over in a lot of really interesting places. And a lot of those places need freelancers. So don't feel shy about sending them an email, sending them a Facebook message, and just telling them that you would love the opportunity to write for them. Sit down and make a list of things that you have covered as a journalist or in PR. If you spent years covering K through 12, find the PR people at school districts in North Texas and send them a note telling them you'd love to write for them. I spent 2 years in communications at UNT, and when I started writing, I contacted a lot of the university PR people and told them about myself, and now I write for many of those university publications. Also, sit down and think about things that you find interesting but never had time to write about. For example, I'm interested in local food, and I noticed that the Star Telegram really had no one who was writing about that, so I started pitching and writing stories about farmers markets and food trends. And that's really a win-win, because I'm writing about something I love and getting clips, and they're filling a hole that they need. Newspapers right now really have a lot of holes in their niche beats, I would say, so you can help fill those. When you contact people, always send a resume and a few good clips. You never know, they might not have any plans to hire freelancers now, but if they do down the road, they'll already have your stuff, and maybe your stuff will just be so good that they'll change their mind. Use social media. When you start freelancing, don't hesitate to make a status about your decision and occasional updates about it. And also keep tabs on other people. I've learned about numerous job opportunities through Facebook. If you're still nervous, start small. Stay in a job or find a part-time job and just look for 1 or 2 freelance assignments. I think once you start, you find that your name gets passed around more than you had expected, and you can really build a client list faster than you thought. And finally, my time as a freelancer has really convinced me of one thing, and that is that there are a lot of jobs out there. We just have to find them, which can be the hard part, but I think the work is out there. So that's all for me.
Great, thanks, sir. I'm sure you all might have some questions for her as well, but we're going to just go through our initial presentations here first. I guess our next presentator is Mike Drago. I'm going to call up Mike's PowerPoint presentation here, which he put together. And Mike, I can be your man of Mike and switch things.
Thank you, man. Hi, everybody.
Morning.
Jake is just introducing me, so I won't bore you with that. Is there anyone here who doesn't know what content marketing is? Don't be bashful. I didn't know 6 months ago. Okay.
He's the vice president.
and I'm a vice president. We had one hand back there, but I'm sure there are others here who don't really have a clear idea of what we do. Okay, my firm is a PR firm that has evolved to the next step, really. We do everything from traditional PR to SEO research on our clients. We help them brand their products, and we also are the media for them. Okay, the way PR used to work is that you would write a press release. PR company would write a press release for your company, and then you would go to Liz Zavala at the Morning News and say, "Please, Liz, write a story on my client." Yeah, right. And she would like ignore my phone calls, right? Now companies have decided to be their own media because the traditional media has a lot less reach than it used to have, and they also, especially in the B2B realm, have found that it's not that effective to put a press release in the Morning News if you're selling managed IT services. You know, it's not a general readership you're after a very specific readership. And so they found the best way to market what they do is to rank higher in Google, right? And the way to do that is to have a lot of content on your website that catches Google's attention. So if I go to Google and I type in managed IT, I'm saying I'm the president of a company and we're having a lot of problem with our technology and we need to find a new managed IT partner. I'm going to go to Google and type in managed IT services, Dallas, and with any luck, my client's product is going to pop up first, right? And so that's what we're trying to do is drive that up with good content. Good content is one of the only ways. Sorry.
When you want me to switch.
Okay. All right. So that's basically what content marketing is companies deciding to be their own media. That's the shorthand version. So go to the first slide. And so I decided, you know, if I had 10 minutes, I'm going to try and hit the 4 or 5 questions you probably have about getting work with us. Okay. The first one is there work to be had? And I think the answer is yes. Jake said in starting out that mainstream media is not the only place you can sell what you do. And I think I would argue that there's much more opportunity for you with PR and content marketing firms than there is in mainstream media. Because I was at the newspaper 6 months ago, we didn't have a big budget for freelance. I didn't hire very many freelancers at all in 20 years, as compared to like 5 years previous. And I pulled we do mostly B2B, but I pulled some quick research from the Content Marketing Institute. 86% of B2B marketers are engaging in content marketing, and you see there 44% outsource some of that content. And this is an interesting thing here. One of the biggest challenges they have is producing enough. Okay, we're overrun with business. My company has doubled in size in a year. Okay, a year ago we had 6 employees, now we have 15, and we're adding business all the time. Companies want to get engaged in this; they see it as a future. Go to the next slide. So what does it pay? I wish I could tell you that we pay $1,000 for a blog post, but it's not. So there are people out there making $50 a blog post. I don't know what you all make for what you write. Our blog posts are typically about 500 words, and there are people out there working for $50. I pay a little more than that. Okay, we pay anywhere from $75 to $150 for, sorry, 75 to about 300 is the most I've paid. It really depends on how much work I'm asking you to do. If I'm asking you to sit through a 3-hour seminar and write a story on that, I know that's going to take you half a day. I'm not going to insult you by maybe $75. You know, I'm going to try and take it. But that's generally the range. Mostly, we try to pay no more than about $100. Okay, and I found when I write blog posts that takes me 2 or 3 hours. So that's, you know, $20-30 an hour is not bad for the day, right? So what to expect? Oh, back up. What to expect? Number one, this is the biggest shock for me, okay, when I came over, knowing very little about what I was about to do. This is not journalism, okay? It's not. And if you go into it hoping for, you know, the same emotional satisfaction you get from writing a news story, or if you go into it thinking you're going to get to write about what you enjoy, you're going to be very disappointed. okay? You're a mercenary. Pure and simple. That's what it is. We do want you to approximate journalism. You know, a company wants to look like, you know, it's producing journalism, but it's really not. You're adopting their point of view and their perspective on whatever it is you're writing about. We are not asking you to promote the client's work. We call it non-branded content, right? We're asking you to align the content with what this company happens to do. So you're not selling their product, you're sort of selling their perspective. Some other non-journalism considerations. We may ask you to include keywords in the copy, right? We may ask you to put in the lead the phrase managed IT services or software development, right? So that's going to help drive up the SEO value of that content. We might ask you to steer around certain points of view or certain, I don't know, competition of our client. We don't want you to, you know, put a lot of name brands in there that might send the reader of that content somewhere else. Again, it's not journalism, right? And the last thing is what to expect. If you are reliable, if you know what you're doing, if you know what you're writing about, you can expect a lot of work. Because, as Sarah said, the number of people out there who can write in English, write well, construct a sentence, put a subject and a verb, and put the period in the right place for the sentence at the end. There are very few, surprisingly few. And if you can show that you're reliable and you know how to do all those things, and you know the subject area, then you're going to get a regular stream of work, right? I have one person I found in Washington who's a tech writer who was writing for Forbes and stuff, and I cold called her. And I've got her writing now exclusively for one of my clients. She writes everything we do for that client on her blog. So that's a very valuable thing. She's getting, 8 to 10 blog posts a month out there. Go ahead, next slide, Jake. Okay, how to do it well. How to do it well. You've got to do your homework. Okay. Number one, you got to know what content marketing is, and be aware that it's not journalism, and be aware that we're going to want you to sort of adopt the client's perspective when you're writing for us. But you need to understand what it is they do. That's the hardest thing for me to do when I engage with a new client, is learn their business. Okay, they're experts at what they do. Generally speaking, we don't. We're all generalists, especially if you come from a newspaper background. But you need to learn the language of that business. You need to learn the difference between SaaS, S-A-S-S, and SaaS, S-A-A-S. I had a freelancer make that mistake this week. You have to know what you're doing. So become an expert. If you want to write for me about managed IT or software development or whatever the client is, supply chain management, you need to do some reading on it before you contact me, or maybe send me some clips that align with that. Have some ideas. I have a pretty good freelancer in Orlando. I'm not giving very much work to because he doesn't pitch me ideas. He waits for me to pitch him ideas. I don't have time for that. I'm managing 6 blogs every week. I'm doing 60 blog posts a month. I don't have time to think for you. You have to think for yourself. Okay, so when you contact me and say, hey, I'd really like to write for blog X and such, have some ideas. Okay. Follow instructions. This is another thing. And a lot of these things are like, if you've been a reporter, these are all the skills that you need to be a good reporter. Follow instructions. If I ask you to write 500 words, please don't send me 1,000. Alex Yeoman. Please don't send me 1,000 words if I need fun. That's just creating work for me. Okay, your goal is to make my life easy. Okay, because if you make my life easy, I'm going to give you a lot of work. Right? Yeah. It's your deadline. One of my freelancers is really good, but she knows she has to file to me on Tuesday and Thursday. Every week I have to call her on Tuesday afternoon and ask her if the blog post is good. Okay? It's a pain. And if I find someone to replace her, I'm going to. She's making my life harder. Okay? I need to find more ways to take on more clients and do more work myself. you're creating more work for me, you're hurting my company. Turn in quality work, right? Spell check is free to use. Hit the button. It's really easy. They tell you when your grammar's wrong. They tell you when the punctuation's wrong. Just use it. I'm shocked at the number of people who send me content that has a misspelled word in the first paragraph or a sentence fragment. It's just so easy to get.
Spell check can get you in trouble, that's it.
What's that?
I said spell check can get you in trouble if you don't check your
Well,
spell
you
check.
have to be careful. Don't expect it. Don't accept every suggestion it makes. And lastly, you don't work for me. You work for yourselves, right? But do me a favor and act like I'm your boss a little bit. Not trying to, lord over you or anything. But again, it's about if I send you an email and it takes you 2 days to respond to me, you're making my life harder, and I'm going to be less likely to hire you again. So do yourself a favor, and I have one freelancer over in Fort Worth, former newspaper guy, that's not his, who ends every email to me by thanking me for letting him write for my blogs. Okay, you don't have to kowtow to me like that, but just return my phone calls, return my email in a timely manner. You have to act like these people are your boss. Next slide, Jake. Last slide, how to get into it. Okay, first learn something about content marketing. There are several syndicates that have and maybe some of you guys have worked with Contently or with eBuyline. I think there's another one out there who you can hook up with. You do have to pay them a portion of what you're earning, right? So there's a downside of that, but they can be a pipeline to a lot of work. We've done some work with eBuyline. The reason we go to them sometimes is because it's reliable. They screen their folks, right? So there's a little less risk there for us. And you can approach companies directly. There are scads of PR companies that have turned into content marketing companies in Dallas. Go to PRSA meetings, go to Social Media Club Dallas, places where you're likely to bump into people like me, my boss, and give them your business card, hand them your resume. Network. The work is out there, so good luck to you.
Thanks, Mike. I mentioned the Social Media Club of Dallas, which I definitely want to tout and promote and encourage you guys to get involved with. In past workshops that we've had here, a year ago we had an entrepreneurial journalism workshop, and the previous year it was a social media workshop, and we've had speakers here from Social Media Club of Dallas. Mike Merrill, who's with a content marketing agency called Reach Local, and then also Cameron Gawley from BuzzShip spoke last year. And so this is really a growing area, and they have these great meetings at the Angelica one Thursday a month, and there's 200 people there usually. There's free food. Well, you do have to pay a ticket, but there's food provided, and great speakers, and it's a really great networking opportunity, and all kinds of, you think our live blog is hopping right now. Go to a Social Media Club of Dallas, the SMC Dallas hashtag. It's a great way to connect virtually as well as in person. It's best when you can combine those two things, right? Like you see someone tweeting, and then during the break you go up and shake their hand and say, hey, I like your tweets. So, well, our next panelist is Kim Ritson-Taylor-Leeson. Kim is, I've introduced her, but Kim, we're really interested because Kim is a visual storyteller to talk to us about how she keeps a steady line of work in as a photographer and videographer, and how she manages to do that and keep up with the equipment needs without the backing of a newsroom that she used to have. And so Kim, you take it away. Thank you. Yeah.
Sarah was talking about how, it's interesting that there's a lot of us that have worked in newspapers for years, and with the decline in employment opportunities at newspapers, we've all kind of scattered around, and I see my former colleagues popping up here and there at different places that aren't newspapers. Like there's quite a few former morning news people that work at SMU, they're working in PR, they're working at all kinds of stuff. I was at KERA the other day, and in the hallway there was like 5 former Dallas Morning News people there that are doing different stuff at KERA. And a lot of people have gone into things that aren't, hard-hitting news photography or news-related things. And like Mike said, a lot of what we do now, he said, this is not journalism. And when you're a freelancer, you have a wide variety of clients, and a lot of them are interested in promoting their own interests, and that becomes my job, is to promote their interests. I'm not necessarily trying to find, truth with the camera and to be unbiased and neutral. I'm trying to make somebody look really good as best as I can, whether they look good or not. And that's not journalism, but as a freelancer, you do have to use your journalistic, I keep saying photojournalism because I'm a photographer. The journalistic skills come into play many times. And ultimately, yes, we are trying to tell truth with our words and with our camera. Sometimes it has a slant for the client, but sometimes it doesn't need to. And because as a journalist, and my background in journalism, all the skills that I learned as a reporter, a visual reporter, come into play today. And I'll give you a brief history of myself. I graduated from East Texas State University in '94 with a major in photography and a minor in journalism, and all I ever wanted to do was be a photojournalist. I worked for the Dallas Morning News for 11 years. I started as an intern, and then I was a freelancer, and then I was a part-timer, and then I was a full-timer. And all that added up to 11 years, and then I had a baby in 2004 and another one in 2006. I met my husband, David Leeson, at the Dallas Morning News. He's also a photojournalist, and worked there for 18 years? 24 years. He won a Pulitzer Prize. So both of us are like hardcore. We love news photography. We love photojournalism. We're coming from that mentality. He left the Morning News about 4 years ago. He took a buyout, the opportunity to take a buyout. So it's been a huge life change for us. I left the Morning News when I had my first child because I didn't want to have a full-time job. I wanted to be at home with my kids, and so I thought, well, I can freelance, supplement the income of the family a little bit, keep my skills sharp in case I want to get back in the game again. I don't think I'll ever work for a newspaper again. Freelance has been good to me. And I'm almost as busy as I was with a full-time job, but most of my work is, I go out to shoot for a couple hours, come home and do my editing. I'm usually there for the kids. We switch back and forth. If I have a job, he's usually home with the kids and vice versa. Although he does come out and shoot with me on some assignments, and I go out and shoot with him on assignments. But we've been able to successfully get our kids, up to school age without having to use daycare or a nanny, and that was my goal. That's why I went freelance. Now I really enjoy freelance very much. And in some ways, it's not quite as glamorous as being a news photographer, but they're pretty cool jobs. Kind of come down the line here and there. But most of what I do is they're money jobs, but I enjoy the challenge of having my own business. I still get a lot of variety. I'm still out and about a lot, which is all the things that I loved about being a news photographer. Something different every day, not sitting behind a desk. And a lot of people also say, "Oh, you're freelance now. You must have a lot more freedom." Well, it's a mixed bag. I have more freedom in the sense that, I can mark a week off my calendar or a day whenever I want. And sometimes I do that, but then a client will call and say, "Oh, I've got this job, and maybe it's worth $1,500. I'm like, "Okay, well, vacation's out the window." Where when you're an employee, you take your vacation week and then they don't bother you. And with freelance too, it's like, you don't check out of the office and now your time is your own. Freelance, it's like, got to be constantly on the phone. The client's emailing you. You got to answer. Last minute needs come up. Are you available tomorrow morning at 9 a.m.? Sorry for the last notice, and I want to be able to say yes. So I wouldn't really say that freelance offers you a lot more freedom. For me, it has. You got to be more on call. And a lot of people ask me, as a freelancer too, what kind of freelance photography do you do? And I say, well, coming from a news photography background, I do it all, pretty much everything. And that's how my journalistic skills have benefited me now as a freelancer, because when you're a news photographer, you cover it all, from breaking news, sports, portraits, food. I can do it all, and I can do it all fast, and that's one thing that clients like about news photographers, is that we can arrive on a scene, make quick decisions, and shoot it fast, and come out with good results. People who have more kind of a commercial or a fine art background, I've heard clients tell me, we like using you because you're fast and you're good, because we've had other photographers, it takes them an hour to set up their lights, and they want to do all these kind of test shots and, consult, and it's too time consuming. And so that's the advantage of my journalistic skills, is that I can get in and get out fast and do a good job, think fast on the spot, because that's what the bulk of our jobs are as photographers. That way. I don't do any kind of advertising or soliciting from client to client. Also, when I'm out on jobs and I meet people that way and they ask for my card. So I haven't had to do any cold calls or sending out my portfolio. There may be a day when I need to, but I haven't had to so far. My marketing is just by doing a great job. Be a quality product, turning in a quality product, having well-rounded skills in business and working with people, and then maintaining a very positive client relationship where they're confident in me and what I'm going to deliver to them. And so that breaks down into ultimately what the client's looking for is good work. They want great pictures. They want great writing. But that does come with a package. And that package is surrounded by things like reliability. You've got to be punctual. You've got to be on time, obviously. These are basic life skills. You have to return calls promptly. Like Mike said, you got to look like you want the job. Return emails promptly. Flexibility, being open to the client's ideas and suggestions, having an enthusiastic attitude about it. Sometimes I'll get calls for stuff that I think is really, their idea on how to approach it is really kind of dumb or kind of cheesy, or it's not really going to look good. Or there'll be a, like art director, on the scene, or somebody who is acting as an art director who has a concept that they want me to execute, and sometimes their idea is really not very good. And so I'm there kind of as a consultant, and to very tactfully and very sweetly take in their ideas, positive, like, oh, that's a great idea, even though it may not be, and say, let's try that. And then I got another idea, let's try this too. I've seen photographers who have cocky attitudes, who reject ideas from the boss because they think they know better, and that's a good way to not get hired again. You need to incorporate their ideas, if not ultimately actually doing it, but at least in your attitude and the way that you handle what they're asking you to do. Not acting like you're too good for anything. Because as a freelancer, sometimes David and I laugh and say, we'll do anything for $50. Sometimes it's that desperate, and you'll do anything for $10. $50 for me.
You only have $5, right?
Buy me lunch.
Actually, he won a Pulitzer Prize in 2004, and it was a great thing. Career highlight, obviously. He was doing freelancing on the side, and it's interesting, after he won the Pulitzer Prize, his freelance went people thought, oh, he's making all the money now, which is not true. Pulitzer Prize did not come with any kind of substantial salary increase. And people also thought, oh, he's not going to want to shoot my little party, or he's way too up there. That's not true either. He'll shoot anything for $10. Our neighbor, after he won the Pulitzer Prize, our next door neighbors were like, you guys probably aren't going to be living in this house very much longer. Seriously, they thought, oh, they hit the big time now. They're going to be moving to Highland Park.
A lot of people thought it was the Nobel Peace Prize.
People thought, a couple people said, didn't you win the Nobel Peace Prize? But it's not true. I mean, Pulitzer Prize, all its notoriety and fame, it did not come with money. It did not come with a personal assistant. It came with a lot of increased demand.
Thought I was too busy.
People thought he was too busy. They thought he was too good for their jobs. And
Did all of that surprise? I hate to interrupt. Did all that surprise you? Were you kind of expecting?
No, it's a total surprise.
Yeah.
In fact, I wondered what happened, so I just called some of my clients and said, what happened? Well, we just figure you're too
How does
busy.
our price range now?
can't afford. People think they can't afford him.
Now that my prices jumped and
Price
actually
cost
Went up to $11.
yeah. Well, I'm thinking of going up to $12.50.
So you did it to yourself.
And the phone was ringing off the wall, but it was like, can you come and speak for free at our conference? Can you spend 2 hours on the phone with me doing an interview for a magazine for free? Which he did all that. He loved it. He's passionate about what he does. We're all passionate about what we do. That's why we do it for not much money. But anyway, that was just sort of an interesting side note there. But right now we're not too good. We'll shoot for anything. We'll shoot anything. And with a great attitude. And that's what keeps the clients calling back. Then over deliver. Give them a little more than what they're asking for. Not in the sense of if they want 500 words, you don't give them 1,000 words. But maybe with photography, it's a little bit different. They say we want a group portrait of our executive board. Okay, well I'm going to give them maybe 3 different angles, rearrange them a little bit so they have options. Because sometimes, especially with photography, the director of our board didn't like the way he looked. We need to reshoot it. But if I've shot it 3 different ways, then they've got options. Maybe he looks better from this angle. So give them a little bit extra to work with, as long as it doesn't take too much time. And then turning stuff in ahead of the deadline. Just give them extra, more than what they wanted, if you can. Staying in touch with technology, obviously, but not overemphasizing it. Especially like with photography, it's not really about the gear, although you do need to have up-to-date, reliable gear that produces a good product, high-resolution images. But it's not about the gear necessarily. Just because you've got a couple of really fancy cameras and a lot of lighting equipment doesn't mean you're going to be a great photographer. You can do a lot with a little, but you do need to be able to, with what you do deliver, it's got to be excellent quality, high resolution, fast transmission, being equipped to, like with my clients, some of them want old school. I want a DVD FedEx to me. That's old school. But some of them are still set in their ways. They've got their methods. They're not as advanced as some other clients who want who've got FTP capabilities. They want their images uploaded by FTP and they've got it all set up. Some want a couple of images emailed to them. There's such a wide variety of different ways to deliver your product. And on my website, which is kimtakespictures.com, I have a client access area where I upload images and then they can go there and pick what they want, download, and I can also set up that gallery. It's a Zenfolio type of that's a Zenfolio website, and I can set it up to where people can order prints for prices that I set, or I can make it fully downloadable for free, or I can make it to where they have to log in with a password or not. There's lots of options that I can offer my client. And then one of the most important things too that I believe in, that my client that I talked to said they're looking for in freelance, is someone who can tell stories. They want storytelling images, and that's where the journalism skills come into play. I can shoot moments. I've trained for years as a news photographer. It's all about moments, and I'm ready with my camera, and I'm anticipating moments, and I'm going to turn in photographs that are compelling, that are more than just the CYA, as they would call it, the cover your ass pictures, which is what they want. They want just the basic shots that show what the event looked like. There's a speaker at the podium and a room full of people. Okay, basic shots, but then they want something extra too, or they're delighted with something extra, whether they use it or not, which is an interesting angle, a close-up shot of a person in the audience with a facial expression. And these things also translate into writing too, because we do a lot of these things in writing that we do also visually, which is you've got the overall, and then you've got the details, and then you've got the emotion. You've got this, you set the scene, and then you've got the emotion in there too. And so my client told me, she said, we like the basic shots, the documents, what the event or the situation looked like, but then we like the little extra sparkle, as she called it, which is, the artsy angle. And I hear that term, what's something artsy? The artsy angle, unexpected, interesting lighting. And those are things that you learn how to do, because in years of working for a newspaper, attending, city council meeting, boring, usually. But you gotta come back with an interesting image. It's gonna be compelling and it's gonna draw the viewer in. And so you learn how to do that by anticipating moments, nuance of facial expression, a gesture, an interesting angle that is unexpected. you can deliver that kind of delightful imagery to a client that's going to keep them coming back. And even if it's a really boring situation, a lot of what we do is, covering things that are might consider to be boring, and to try to make it look good, and to try to make something that is lovely for the viewer. It's going to draw them in. Artsy, yeah, artsy fartsy. And then caring about the assignment. Even you may not care really about this subject matter at hand, but you make yourself care about it. You think about it. You get into it. How can I convey this effectively and with some power? How can I make images that are going to be compelling? And to think about the way that you shoot it, translate what the client wants. You listen to what they're asking for, and then you translate it, and you can refine it. And also being able to think on your feet, problem solving, being scrappy, salvaging boring situations. Like my client told me, she said, I want somebody who, if they're having trouble finding parking, they're not going to be calling me on my cell phone telling me they can't park and it's 5 minutes before the event starts. You got to figure it out. You got to be able to make things happen, not bother your client with all the nitty-gritty and the dirty details. They don't want to know all that. All they want is a great product delivered efficiently, fast, and beautifully in the end. So those are kind of the basics that stood out to me. Jake wanted me to show my gear.
Can you just show us what your staple gear is?
Okay.
But you did make the point that it's not about the gear; it's more about the storytelling. But show us what your standbys are.
But it's not what it's all about.
Yeah.
But this is kind of what I look like, basically, when I go out on a job. And I'll have clients that say, "No, you probably should get there. 45 minutes you can set up." And I'm like, "There's no setup. It's just me and 2 cameras." And they like that too.
And sometimes me holding the reflector.
In my
I do that for $5.
She pays you?
So here's my fanny pack. I used to carry a big heavy bag on one shoulder, and I was at a high school football game. This was like 15 years ago. And this old timer came up to me and he was like, lady, you probably shouldn't carry your bag like that, because trust me, in 20 years you're going to be suffering. It's like this big old bag right here. And so I took his advice, and this is what I do. I have this crossbody bag right here, kind of distributes the weight, and then I usually have 2 cameras. These are Canon EOS 5D Mark IIs, which is, you could say this is the latest greatest, although there is a 5D Mark III now, which we can't afford. But this is more camera than I need, more camera than what even most of my clients need. So I go out looking like this. This is exactly how I looked when I was on assignment for a newspaper. This is a wide-angle lens here, 24 to 105, and this is a telephoto lens. So I'm ready for, just standing right here and get a nice wide-angle shot of the room, and then I can also zoom in on the girl in the back row right there, and I'm ready to go. And I'm not flipping around changing lenses. And then in my bag here, I've got my strobe with a strobe charger. This recycles my flash really fast, and so I connect that to this. And this is pretty much what I look like. And I'm a photojournalist, and I love it. And then I have a little portable studio too, because this is my reflector. And if I want to shoot a portrait, the natural lighting is not really good, and so I need to introduce my own light. I can grab somebody or put this on a stand and hold this up. And if I want to shoot a really beautifully lit portrait of her, an assistant's going to hold this, and I'm going to take my flash off camera, bounce it into this reflector, and it's going to give me this beautiful studio lighting on her. So it's like a little instant pop-up portable photo studio, which enables me to work fast, effectively. I do have a full-on studio lighting setup that you can come to my house if you need a corporate headshot. You can come to my house and I'll set it up in my living room or in my converted garage with a backdrop. I have various backdrops. I've got lighting, reflectors. I can do that whole deal. Or I can bring it, it's all portable, I can bring it to your office and shoot your whole staff and do some beautiful corporate headshots. Or we can just, if you're on a limited budget and you need some really, cheap corporate headshots, well, we can do them fast. I can spend an hour with each one of your people and shoot them in a variety of different ways, some full length, some headshots. Or if you just want something really basic, we can just utilize natural window lighting. Go down to the lobby where the lighting is beautiful, and I can knock out a nice, professional headshot in about 3 minutes because I'm fast. I can be fast. So, offering lots of options, a lot of variety, a lot of skills, from corporate headshots to your wedding, to your, special speaker, your special event. Then also, obviously, I am a news photographer, always being ready for, if a explosion happens on Central Expressway, there's going to be a hammer in my purse or in my back of my car, and I'm going to be ready to hit that too. So anyway, I love what I do. I miss my days as a news photographer. I miss the family. I miss the everyday interactions, sitting in the scanning room or the dark room, talking about pictures. I miss that a lot, but Dallas Morning News isn't even like that anymore. They're all working from home, transmitting from home, rarely coming into the office. It's a different generation now. But anyway, hopefully some of those tips, these are a lot of photo tips, but hopefully that translates into the world of freelance for all of you guys. Yeah.
Demo too. So maybe if Sarah and Mike can kind of come up and stand up here, and we'll go to the question and answer. We do have one question I saw, a crowdsourced question from the audience. Felicia had a question for Kim, but if we can all just kind of stand up here and answer you guys' questions, I guess, for the next few minutes. Felicia. Oh, Felicia, yes. So, okay.
Hi, I go by Lisa.
Oh, sorry, Lisa.
That's okay. I had a question about what resources online or otherwise you would recommend for like a novice photographer. I know, like you said, you went to school for it, but I know there's a lot of resources. I didn't know if you had any favorites.
Resources for a novice photographer in what area specifically about doing photography? Or
Yes, yeah.
Mostly
That's what I was going to say.
Just kind of trial and error.
Looking at pictures. Pictures are out there everywhere.
look at how they're lit and angles and stuff like that.
Yeah, I mean, online resources, obviously, Fresh and Visual, there's a lot of different kind of clubs and organizations that you can join, but if you want to do something online, for me, what I'm doing, before I go out on a photo shoot, a lot of times, I will just Google, maternity portrait, if I've got a maternity portrait shoot, or corporate headshot, or, band photo, or whatever my subject matter is at hand, because sometimes I want some inspiration. And so I just go online, Google whatever my subject matter is, and hit images at the top, and it'll just give me thousands of images, and I draw a lot of inspiration that way. Google, sometimes if I have to go out and shoot a portrait, I've been known to Google Annie Leibovitz, and I just looking at her imagery fires me up and inspires me. That's my best first tip for online inspiration.
I would add this, it's because you don't have rolls of film anymore, just shoot.
Okay.
Right? And find a good photographer friend.
Yeah.
There are a lot
Give you
of,
advice.
one of the blogs I edited is photo related. It's a blog for the Black Star agency. And and just Googling to find content for that blog and find content producers for that blog. There are tons of photo blogs out there where photographers are talking about their work and how they do it, even technical details, and how to run a photo business and all this stuff. Tons of material on the internet.
Yes, like senior portraits. Sometimes I do senior portraits, and sometimes I'll just go to a senior portrait website and look at their work, and then that draws me into their website, and I look at how they've structured their website, I look at their rate structure. It gives me lots of ideas for changes that I can make in my own business. So just like maybe whatever photography you're interested in, Google some photographers that are doing that work, see how they've built their website, see how they structure their rates, see how they, what images they put up on their website, and that's basically, for me, the best way I've found inspiration online.
We're going to switch here between tweeted questions and in-person questions, but we have an actual live in-person question.
Okay, so Mike, I was curious to know how you transitioned from the Dallas Morning News to the gig at Idea Grove, because those of us that work for AP and different, entities, and we're transitioning. The key is the strategy. So I'm really would love for you to tell us how you did that.
The dude called me. No, I mean, it's networking. You know, a former colleague at the Morning News, Clay Ziegler, who used to work with Jake a lot, went over. He got laid off, actually, in the last round of Morning News layoffs, and had a job at the Idea Grove within a week. At the time, the Idea Grove was, 3 people, basically. Scott Barrett, the president, was running it out of his home and transitioning into a real business, and hired Clay. And 1 year later, Clay was asking me out to lunch because they needed to add, someone who knew something about journalism to the staff. And
But what made you say yes?
it was, I had a really good career at Morning News. I had no reason to leave. Of course, there's the constant cloud that's been over the industry since about 2000. Wears on you after a while, even if you don't think you're going to lose your job anytime soon. Living in a constant environment of downsizing is stressful, and there were some personal dynamics that made it the right time for me to go. I was in a position where I could afford to take a chance, and so I did.
Mike, as a follow-up on Twitter, somebody asked how often you work with freelancers as opposed to in-house writers.
I don't have any in-house writers. The in-house writers meet. One of the reasons we're doing a lot more freelance is because we have to scale this business. And I can't write everything. I can't write 60 blog posts a month, research 60 blog posts a month. And so, yeah, pretty much anything that I don't write, and we don't just do blog content, right? I'm writing press releases. We're doing releases to send out to NASDAQ, and I'm writing speeches for CEOs and things like that. So I'm pretty busy. So anything I don't write, I outsource.
Sarah, for you, wonder if we could, Alan Manning, our dedicated co-organizer, tweets a question from his sickbed. What are some pitfalls beginners to freelancing should watch out for when accepting projects? When you're thinking about getting into the freelance world, do you take anything you can get, or do you, what factors do you take under consideration?
I didn't have this happen to me, but I know freelancers who were looking and found like assignments that paid like $15. I mean, just crazy rates. So I guess I would have avoided that. But other than that, I really think you should, if it's a reasonable rate, you should take it, because it may turn out to be like a regular job that can pay, a steady rate.
What would you say a reasonable rate is?
Varies so much. I don't think I would, if it's like a nonprofit, I think you can go down to like maybe 25 an hour, but I don't think that I would go anything lower than that. And private companies can often pay way more. And other than that, just figuring out when you get paid. Sometimes if you do an assignment that's 2 months before you get paid, and it can be a little hard to make a budget with that.
And Joanna Katnack is here. Joanna, we had a question on Twitter for kind of, I think Sarah can tackle as well, about doing how you research for potential publication or client before you pitch.
Yeah, Mike, you talked about that too. Just talk a little bit about how you do research before you pitch to a client. Sometimes I go to Half Price Books, and I will just look through the old copies just to get an idea of what this publication is about, what they sound like. I also look at Media Bistro, which is a great resource for that. But can you talk a little bit about what would you suggest before you pitch to a magazine or a nonprofit or anything? Where should a freelance writer look before they do that?
Pre-pitch research.
I just read a publication every day for a while. If I know people who work there, I talk to them about where their holes might be. I don't know if you have any.
I'd say you got to read the trades in that, whatever. Again, I do B2B, so if you ask me what I'm looking for, and I say, well, I got this client that sells supply chain management solutions, and I got a client who's doing IT staffing, and I got a client who's doing software development. I would really bone up on, software development. What are the latest trends? What are the latest trends in IT staffing? Outsourcing. You really have to, like I said, get in the mode of thinking that our client is in. It's not so much, and also read the blog that you're going to be writing for. Learn the voice, learn the perspective. What are the things they're hitting on? And align yourself with that. Again, it's not journalism. Like Kim said, it's not art. It's not artsy-fartsy. It's not, bringing your best judgment to it all the time. It's approximating journalism from the client's perspective.
Can I follow up with that? 'Cause especially for Sarah, because you're straddling both of those worlds. Because you're doing a cop shift tonight for the We're Star Telegram, and that most certainly is journalism. But then you have freelance clients too. So, do you ever struggle with that balance in terms of writing for a mainstream organization versus for a client? And Kim can weigh in on this, I think, too.
Sure, I find that really the writing is the same in the way that you just need solid, good, clear, descriptive writing. What I struggle with is avoiding conflicts because I freelance for a lot of universities in my area, and then I write for the Star Telegram. So that's my big. Trying to avoid conflicts is.
So you couldn't generally cover university-related news usually, or
I would typically avoid, like, I freelance for UT Arlington. If they were making a big announcement, I wouldn't go cover that, but I would feel comfortable, if I'm writing a story, I would feel comfortable using one of their professors as an expert. And I just talk to my editor if I'm ever worried about a conflict.
what other questions? Let's go to Rob back there.
So this one could be for Sarah or Kim, and I'm just thinking from a student's perspective, if somebody's coming into journalism, looking at freelance, and wants to do those sort of stories, Mike talked about the emotional satisfaction stories, kind of stuff that they're interested in, classic journalism. What tips would you have for finding that kind of work? And I actually have one myself, which would be to go and look at overseas newspapers, some of which are actually expanding and all of which like stories from the US. That's one place where I think there's journalism work to be found, but I'm wondering, what tips you would have for finding journalistic work.
Just basically, tailor your portfolio to what you want to do, and pitch your portfolios to those type of clients. It's very simple. If you have a specific kind of targeting that you want to do, I'll do I do anything and everything from weddings to events to whatever. I do it all. But if you really want to spend your time doing like a certain type, you just have to pitch to those type of clients. You have to tailor a package your portfolio with that type of imagery or that type of writing, and then just get out there and beat the streets and talk to those type of clients.
And I don't know about the morning news, but the Star Telegram actually uses quite a few freelancers now as they've had to reduce their staff. And so I think there are a lot of opportunities there, and I don't know about other papers, but especially even college kids, I think they would be, good college kids, they would be willing to use.
I think we've got time for one more question, and then, of course, we're going to have a 15-minute break, in which case you can, approach people individually. But let's go right here.
I was just curious to know, have you guys ever been stiffed by a client, and how did you collect?
And we will be delving into that much more deeply in our third panel, by the way, making the money work. But since you guys are up here, let's tackle that.
I'm not.
When I was just getting started as a freelancer, I was still, I think I was interning, I was freelancing for the morning news. I was really young. Some startup publication, I can't remember the name of it. This was local little magazine. Got me to shoot a portrait of Kenneth Cole, big name shoe designer at North Park, and I did a little profile on him, and they paid me $50. That was going to be the fee, and I invoiced them. And then I never got paid, and I got in touch with them, and they're like, oh yeah, okay, yeah. And still never got paid, and then they folded. They just didn't make it, so I got screwed over on that one. But I've also had clients who don't pay. Maybe the invoice gets lost in the papers somewhere or at someone's desk. So I have to really stay on it. And I have to keep a file of accounts receivable and check it. And when it starts to get like 3 months and I haven't got paid, I have to prompt the client and they're like, oh, I'm so sorry, I don't know what happened. And they'll pay. And if they have the money, they'll pay. And usually clients have the money. But stuff gets lost, you gotta stay up on top of it. And just very sweetly, it's no problem, I just wanna make sure I didn't get lost somewhere. And usually that's what's happened, it's gotten lost somewhere. It's
You
not that
shouldn't
they
feel
don't wanna
shy
pay.
about that. I manage about 35
Yeah.
freelancers, and they invoice, we try to get them to invoice one time a month, so they're not like after every blog post or whatever. But they'll get lost in my email, or
It does happen
I thought I
quite
forwarded
a
it to
lot.
the business manager, but I didn't. And
It does
so
happen
don't
quite
be
a
shy.
lot.
I'm not
Yeah.
offended if people ding me. We pay very promptly at our place as our business person. But I wouldn't be offended if someone dinged me and said, "Hey, I sent you that thing 3 weeks ago. What case?"
But I've also found that, especially PR companies love to, they don't even start your process for 30 days in a lot of cases, depending on, that's why I love working with event companies more than PR companies, because they tend to pay faster. But I usually at 35 days after the event, if I haven't seen anything, then I say, hey, just want to make sure you got all the paperwork and that you don't have anything you need.
That's right.
Because PR firms don't pay until the client pays them, which is often 90 days.
Well, we
I
don't-
usually give it 3
Just
months
speaking from
before
our
I
place,
start asking.
we don't work that way. Our cash flow, frankly, thankfully, is not that.
Plus remember to always send your W-9 with the first invoice.
Yes, Liz
Yeah.
Zavala is going to lead us into a lot of those nuts and bolts in the third session. So, we're just wrapping up, Nikki. Did you have a question? Or?
I just wanted to add, because I manage a lot of crew, and yes, every once in a while things do get lost. And I will continue working with people if they're polite about saying, hey, you forgot to pay me. Every once in a while we forget, and it's almost an aggressive attack, like it was deliberate. So I think also how we ask is important, because it's usually a mistake.
Absolutely.
Well, I think that's about all we have time for today. Let's thank our panel. Have a little token of appreciation for all three of our panelists. And before we scatter around for our 15-minute break, we've got a great second panel coming up focusing on the legal and ethical issues of freelancing. But what I neglected to do before we started our panel today was, first of all, to recognize some of the other Press Club members, Deborah Marine, in particular, and Liz Zavala and Rudy Bush, who helped organize this. We all got together at Torchy's Tacos about 6 weeks ago and helped put this together. But also our president, Liz Oliphant, would like to talk to you about the benefits of belonging to the Press Club and some events that we have coming up.
I'm really glad you all are here. This is probably the fourth or fifth workshop we've had over the last couple of years. All of them have been so useful to whatever particular audience that we had here for it. So I'm glad you're here. I think they put together really great panels that are going to be really helpful to you. Having had my own PR business for these many years, so many of these things are just second nature to me, but when you're just getting started in the freelance world, sometimes the hardest part is getting paid, and second, keeping up with your finances in between those paychecks or lack of some. So this will be really useful, the topics they've come up with. We very much would love to have you join the Press Club. It's really very inexpensive these days. It's $50 if you're in the media freelancer, $75 if you're in the PR marketing side of things. Go to the PressClubDallas.com website. You can sign up there. We have monthly happy hours, networking hours. Our next one is this coming Wednesday night at House of Blues downtown. We have one of our board members, Phyllis Hammond at CDB, has negotiated wonderful food for us. You have to buy your own drinks, but it's happy hour prices. She's even negotiated a bargain on parking, which of course is at a premium down there. Our next event is going to be at KERA on March 19th with Mark McKinnon, who was at the Bush White House at once upon a time. He is now head of a nonprofit called No Labels, a nonpartisan group that is trying to persuade Congress to work together and accomplish something.
It's working out well.
Has notable success already in some areas. So that's at 6:30 on March 19th at KERA. So we do Eventbrite, we do website posts, so those will let you know about it. But please do consider joining the club. We badly need you. We're trying to offer information and programs that people will find helpful and useful in your career. And we're glad you're here today.
Great. And of course, another person I'd like to recognize standing in the back there is the incoming Press Club president and chair of the SMU Division of Journalism, Tony Peterson. Responsible for so much of the success we have here at the Division of Journalism. So let's take a break and tell legal perspective about what, from the mundane to some of the more potentially explosive issues that freelancers need to deal with from a legal standpoint. We also have Mark Donald, who's currently a freelance writer and editor and adjunct professor at the University of North Texas. From 2008 to 2011, Mark was editor-in-chief of the Dallas Observer, which he joined in 1997, and has worked as a senior reporter with Texas Lawyer newspaper and also a senior editor at D Magazine. Got his law degree from right here at SMU. So we're very privileged to have two lawyers here with us this morning to talk about freelancing from a legal perspective and maybe some ethical questions as well that you guys might have. So without further ado, I think Tom's going to go first, and then Mark, and then we'll open it up to questions. Thanks, Tom.
Well, thank you, and thanks for having me. Glad to be here. Happy Texas Independence Day, and whatever else today is. Today is Texas Independence Day. So I think what Mark and I are going to do is first each of us just talk for a few minutes about the first session, and I know it probably will be covered in more detail in the third session, but that's contracts. And I do think for any serious freelancing work, now I'm not talking about, okay, maybe one time for a very close friend I'm going to do something and I'm doing it as much as a favor as business. That might be different. But for anything serious, I do think it is important to have a contract. And it's to me, what the contract says is less important than that there be one and everybody understands what it means. Now, a lot of large news organizations are going to have a form contract, and unless you are a very highly sought after freelancer, you're not going to have a whole lot of negotiating leverage, and it's going to be take it or leave it. And, like any other take it or leave it deal, you make the best judgment and you take it or leave it. So a lot of this, you may not have a lot of choices about, but you at least need to be aware of the issues. And it seems to me the basics are, and this, contracts don't have to look like, a 500-page single-space document. There are all kinds of good freelance contracts you can find on the internet. Some of them for free, some of them behind membership, logins, or other forms of paywalls. The Society of Professional Journalists, for example, has a very good one. It is on a members-only login basis, though. And there are all kinds of other organizations that do the same. But apart from what the contract says, it seems to me it needs to address a couple of basic things. One, and this does relate to what I heard at the very end of the first session, when do you get paid? Is it upon turning it in? Is it upon publication? Is it upon 30 days from now? Is it upon whenever they get around to it? Whatever it is, it is. Now, having a contract is no guarantee you will actually get paid, of course. There's a great expression that there's no law that says you got to follow the law. But at least then, if you really do run into a problem, you can say, hey, wait a minute, you signed this deal that said I was supposed to get paid upon turning it in, and that was 4 Christmases ago, and you still haven't paid. So that's one thing, obviously. The second thing, or a second thing that I think is important, is what rights are you conveying? In most of these large news organization form contracts, you are conveying every right known to man. On every form of medium that we haven't even thought of yet, whatever it is, you convey it. And again, you may be in a take it or leave it deal. The National Writers Union, which is loosely affiliated with Columbia School of Journalism, has a form contract on their website, which is very author-friendly. It says you are only conveying the one-time only rights to print only, and I, the author, reserve everything else. Well, if you can get them to sign that, great. But again, for my purpose today, it's not so much what I want to get across. It's not so much what it says, but just that you be sure that you address that. Expenses. If you're taking on an assignment that will involve any kind of out-of-pocket expense, be it travel or something as mundane as the parking lot down by the courthouse, who's going to pay it? Again, the chances are you are, unless these are serious expenses and you talk about it up front and whoever is hired you agrees to do it. But my point is it just needs to be addressed one way or the other. Typically in these contracts you will warrant that you are not infringing on somebody else's copyright, that it's not defamatory, that you're not hurting anybody, that you're not going to do anything that's going to cause them to get sued. That's pretty common, but what you do need to look at is what happens if that's not true. Are you agreeing to indemnify the publication, for example? Are you agreeing to indemnify the publication if a lawsuit does get filed as a result of what you wrote? And if so, what does that mean? Does that mean you, at your own expense, have to go out and hire a lawyer to defend the suit? Typically, you're not in a position to do that. So be alert to that. A much fairer arrangement is that perhaps you have to indemnify only up to the amount of the fee you were paid, something like that. So in other words, you write a piece for the Dallas Observer, which I mentioned just because I have it right here in front of me and it caught my eye, and they get sued and they paid you $1,000 for it. Perhaps you can negotiate a clause that, worst case, all you have to do is give back your $1,000. You don't have to sell your firstborn to pay the cost of the defense. Again, the point being more that it be addressed one way or the other. So just be aware of that. Again, you may not have a whole lot of room to negotiate about that, but I do think it is important. The last mundane thing I will say, then I'll yield to Mark, and then maybe in the Q&A we'll talk about things that are more entertaining. The last mundane thing I want to say is if you're really going to do this full-time as a real business, and probably some of you already are, and perhaps others of you want to do that at some point, at some point consider creating a legal entity, a corporation or an LLC or something like that. Now, the pros and cons of doing that are way beyond the scope of this presentation or the time that we got allowed to us, and they are very difficult to generalize about because this can depend on your other circumstances, your other personal financial resources, maybe you do or do not have a working spouse, things like that. They all come into play, and there are tax issues and as well as legal issues. But my point here is not to suggest what the answer might be in your particular situation, but just to suggest that you be aware of that. And if this is really going to be a business as opposed to just something you do every now and then when the mood strikes you or when somebody you know asks you, you should at least consider that, get some professional advice, and make whatever decision is appropriate for you at the time. Okay.
And now we have Mark Donald.
When we decided to split this up, Tom, who is the actual practicing lawyer, I don't practice anymore. I don't even play one on TV. But I decided to take the ethical portion of this. When I started looking into this and trying to come up with a presentation, it's hard not to talk about your own personal experiences. I just want to. I was a freelance writer, and when I started to become one, way back in the Jurassic period, I was naive enough to think that I could make a living. Dallas was a city of entrepreneurs, and I had practiced law for about 10 years and started my own and built my own law practice. So I thought maybe I could do the same thing as a freelance journalist. I was somewhat naive in thinking this, but when you're young and full of piss and vinegar and don't know the rules, it's easy not to be limited by them. And I think for many of you, that's one of the things that you have for yourself, going for yourself, is that you kind of don't know the rules, and this is a benefit as well as a burden. For me, it was kind of a benefit because I've been a pushy lawyer for about 10 years, and I was unafraid to insinuate myself into almost any situation. Now, the life of a freelancer, whether an ultimate one or not, is pushy and messy and independent and boundless and penniless and self-directed and misdirected and full of inspiration and rejection and fierce determination. And that's usually just in the first week. Not knowing where your next story is coming from, much less your next meal, can be downright motivational. But it can also lead to a lot of ethical dilemmas that freelancers can ultimately find themselves kind of ensnared in. Even though I didn't know the rules, I as a lawyer, I was sort of bound by, I knew legal ethics, and it was very easy to sort of draw parallels between legal ethics and journalistic ethics. There was no grievance committee in journalism. Nobody could yank my journalism license, but it was still easy to see the kinds of parallels between things like conflicts of interest and sort of breaching confidential relationships and communications, and sort of giving both sides a fair hearing, and the importance of accuracy, full disclosure, of not misrepresenting myself either to a jury or a judge or the public. Now that I was writing as a freelancer, so it's very easy to read these rules. They're out there. The Society of Professional Journalists, I don't know if you all have their ethical guidelines, and it's a one-page sheet. It's you can download it from their website. But when you read it, it sounds very much like reading something that the Boy Scouts would follow. But it's very fundamental and very important. And I mean, would I take more than a cup of coffee if I was interviewing somebody? Would I agree to lunch or dinner or some kind of junket? The kind of writing that I was doing, no, I definitely wouldn't. Would I attempt to get both sides of the story to be fair and accurate? Of course I would. Would I take from another story without attribution or permission? Plagiarism is the death knell to any career. Certainly not. These were sort of the rules of the game of staff writers as well as freelancers, and if they were subject to interpretation, because as Tom knows from the law and as I know from ethics, ethics are, and we know from, if we've taken any classes in journalism, ethics are really subject to interpretation. But the ultimate interpretation, the ultimate higher authority is the editor that you work with as a freelancer, and you should turn to that editor if you have a question, that higher authority, in order for you to help make that kind of judgment call. Well, it seemed like things were pretty easy and pretty, not easy, but I had a sense of the rules, and then came the internet and online publishing, and what seemed like sort of a rock salad values suddenly kind of began to erode. Print and broadcast, you certainly want to get the scoop, you want to be the first, but the internet was sort of a whole new ball game. With print and broadcast, that scoop seemed to be tempered by, those journalistic values of accuracy and objectivity and fairness and independence. And we certainly still want that on the internet, but these sort of universal values that we preach on the internet the internet sort of had its own values, which was speed and immediacy and transparency and subjectivity. And when those two sets of values kind of clash, as they well do, if you are in the business of journalism and in the business of freelancing, we kind of, print guys looked like we were selling out a little bit. And sometimes we got the sense that we were. When I freelanced for about 10 years and then started to have more children and needed more benefits, and I went on staff at a few different publications and eventually convinced the owners of Village Voice Media to let me become the editor of the Dallas Observer. And during my 4 years there, it seemed like all we were talking about, and I would venture to say most newsrooms at this time around the country, all they were talking about was how we could monetize this new technology of the internet. And the Observer's response was to move resources from print to online, and we created 5 blogs, a general interest news blog, maybe some of you read it, Unfair Part, a sports blog, a food blog, a music blog, and eventually a culture blog. And these were kind of beasts that had to be fed, 8 to 10 posts a day. And with my sort of incredible shrinking staff because of layoffs and the kinds of things that we were forced to do because of the recession, I turned to freelancers to sort of feed the beast. Now the internet is a beautiful beast. It's got an amazing memory, it's democratic, it creates communication, communities of conversation, and if used for good as opposed to evil, it can inform and enrich and enlighten. And it creates tremendous opportunities for freelancers who can become published with a click of a mouse. But you also as an editor start looking for the ultimate freelancer who can sort of do it all, who can not only write and report, but who can use video and photography and can blog into the wee hours of the night. I remember a couple of years ago reading an article in the New York Times, and it was called Death by Blogging, which kind of gives you an idea of the possibilities that are inherent in this ultimate freelancing kind of situation. So 50 posts a week. Where do you have the staff to edit? When you're with print, you've got a situation where you've got an editor and a copy editor and a proofreader, and if you're lucky, a fact checker. But when you're blogging that much, not much editing goes on, and we would post without editing and just wait for someone to complain if there was a problem. So where is the journalistic ethic of accuracy? How does that come to play? When you have 50 posts a week and you couldn't get in touch with a source, could you hold a story for a comment? Well, the beast wouldn't allow that. You post a story and you update later. But what about the journalistic ethic of objectivity? 50 posts a week, and the beast wants the attitude of blogger. You're told to write funny, you're told to write whimsical, you're told to write in a very conversational way, in an opinionated way, so that you can converse with this community out there, this community of readers and users, but then where is the journalistic ethic of fairness and neutrality? So clearly, there was this clash, and there is this clash, and these are things that have really not been solved yet, and professors and scholars are talking about these issues, and some people are talking about it sort of in a sliding scale fashion, and although we certainly don't teach this to our students, There is definitely the reality of the web and the reality of print and broadcast may create two different sort of sets of ethics, if you will. Most people are still holding freelancers to the same standard as they do their own staffers. But sometimes freelancers sort of get caught in the middle because you have to really protect yourself. When staffers get in trouble, ethical trouble, a lot of times newspapers will sort of circle the wagons. With freelancers, sometimes they are made examples of, sometimes they get paid so little per post. If you're talking about blogs, they get paid, not all the time, but there's less money on the internet to pay freelancers, and whereas in print, back in the day, you could get $1 or $2 a word, it's hard to get that kind of money, and so people don't spend as much time, they might cut corners, yet they're still being held to this very, very strong standard. I have food bloggers who, some of them weren't in it for the money, they just wanted to be big players in the music scene, in the food scene, and so they would do things that sort of bordered on the unethical. I'd have food bloggers who because I was sort of in charge of the food blog for a couple of years, and I would have food bloggers who would do profiles on executive chefs, and they'd set up a meal. The executive chef would cook them a meal for them and their friends, and they seem to have more and more friends, and as a result, I had to put a stop to that kind of behavior. But so the line sometimes gets blurred, and in spite of it getting blurred, there's still certain ethics that need to be immutable, and one is plagiarism. It's very easy to cut and paste, and the medium, the technology sort of lends itself to that. It sort of lends itself to going on Google Images and drawing something down, but there are copyright issues involved that are very strong, and people want to enforce. You want to avoid conflicts of interest. No gifts, no meals. Your obligation is to the public. If you do happen to find yourself being with a meal that's being comped, disclose it to your readers. If you do find yourself in a situation where you're writing for an industry, where you're working in an industry that you're writing about, you need to make full disclosure to your readers. Don't run with rumor and innuendo. Always verify. Go to and try and get to the source of the information. I guess it was last year, the governor of South Carolina, there was a blogger who was very upset with the governor. It was one of her chief sort of provocateurs and antagonists, and he put out there that she was being investigated by the Internal Revenue Service, and it just wasn't true at the time. And because the Washington Post, because of different aspects of this, the story got circulated, and other blogs picked it up, and eventually the Washington Post picked it up, and they didn't even call the governor before they ran with it. So these things happen, and we need to be diligent. We need to keep reporting. We need to get to the source of the information. If you do have ethical questions and something is nagging at you, you're having sort of a dark night of the soul, your conscience is bothering you, and you sort of have these questions about whether you should or shouldn't do something because of a journalistic ethic, the best thing you can do is to contact your editor, because you all have you're on the same page here. You both want the same thing, and that is to do the right thing, to preserve your reputation, and to live up to the standards of your profession. So,
great. Stand kind of shoulder to shoulder here. You might avoid being blinded by the projector, which is kind of we like to have supplementary material in the background, but it can be sort of detrimental to the eyesight of our panelists sometimes. But anyway, thanks very much for that overview, guys. There's a few questions on Twitter that wanted to definitely get to, but part of it is the ethics of and the legalities of, let's say I'm a freelancer and I've got this great idea. What do you think the protocols are in terms of shopping it to multiple clients? I mean, let's say you've got a dream place for it to run, but you pitch it to the editor and it sits on the back burner for a month. What would you advise in terms of if you've got a story, pitching it? Do you only pitch once at a time, or how do you handle
multiple submissions?
Yeah.
I guess this would be more appropriate. Well, I don't think the internet has changed that. I think you're talking about business relationships here. You're talking about if you have a relationship with an editor, and and you want this particular online publication or print publication to run your story, but you make a story pitch. You can either just wait for the response because you have an ongoing working relationship that you don't want to jeopardize, or you can say in your story pitch, listen, I'm making multiple submissions. As long as you fully disclose, I think you're fine. Now, editors like to think that there are no other gods before them, so they might get upset if they are invested in you as a writer. If they run a lot of your stuff, they're going to think that you have an obligation to come to them first, and I think you should give them the right of first refusal on your work. Because if you've got a good, listen, there's nothing better than a good relationship between a freelancer and an editor. And if they take the time to see something in you, to nurture you along, then that's hard to build again and again and again. So many times as a freelancer, you'll have, I worked a little bit for GQ, and I had this great relationship with this editor, who was the managing editor of GQ, and I wrote this piece and got a lot of great play off of it, and then all of a sudden he was gone. He became the editor of Philadelphia Magazine, and I had to start all over again. So when you've got somebody like that, make sure you nurture it and realize that this is a business relationship, and you've got to go for it and keep it as solid and happy and humming as you can.
Yeah, the only thing I would add, his lawyer background occasionally, comes out. He used the term right of first refusal, which is a nice legal term.
Okay.
And very good. Once a lawyer, always a lawyer, right? But again, that kind of goes back to what I said in the opening. Know what the deal is, and to me, that's less important than what the deal is, but just that you know what it is. And do keep in mind you cannot copyright an idea. And that is the one piece of legal advice. But if you have a good relationship and you go to the Observer, we'll continue to use for an example, and say, I'm going to give you a right of first refusal. I'm not going to show this or shop this anywhere else for a week. But after a week, it's mine, and I'm assuming you don't want it, and you're not going to steal my idea and all that. And just be clear about that, and especially if it's somebody you work with on a regular basis.
It's it's free enterprise out there, but editors have to know how hard it is out there, and I think they understand. And if they're not going to act on it, if they're not going to snap to it, they're probably not that interested in the first place.
So following up on it, switching the tables a little bit, Joanna, you had a question for Tom.
Yes, I have a client who I write for, and that client recently told me they were going to take a story I'd given them and give it to a magazine. My client is paying me for what I wrote for them, but I'm not getting compensated by that magazine, and I never gave them permission in any contract that I signed for them to shop it out to somebody else. So what do I do? I want to keep this client, so I haven't said anything, but I'm worried that this is going to become a practice for them. So they get a twofer, and I get paid once.
Well, I guess I have a couple of thoughts, not necessarily in the same sequence you pose the question, but one is, and a lot of practicing law is telling people, besides what the law is, kind of what the realities of life are. And if you have an ongoing business relationship with someone that you want to maintain, you know, that can often temper what the strict letter of the law might say are your rights. And obviously that's a business judgment, and one would hope you can work something out. The first question is, what rights did you give to them when you sold them the piece? Now, you say you didn't give them anything, you know, that would permit this, and for our purposes, this is of course all just hypothetical, like everything here. We'll assume that's the case. If I write the piece and I sell it to you, and assume for the sake of this discussion, I have really only sold you a one-time use, and then you resell it to Jake's magazine, you've committed copyright infringement. It's mine. I mean, I am in the absence of an employment relationship or a work-for-hire agreement, the author owns the rights. And so I have, in effect, only licensed to use the one-time right to use it, and it's otherwise mine. Now, you know, am I going to really try to enforce that, especially if there's a business relationship? That's different, and that's a different analysis. Now, if, on the other hand, you've signed one of those contracts, like a lot of them that are out there, you probably conveyed to them, or you may have conveyed to them, the right to do anything they want to with it until the end of time. When I was just prepared to come over here today, I was looking at a few samples. Again, these are all samples that I just found in 2 minutes on the internet. None of these are documents I would write, of course. But one I found, which I think is fairly common these days. Writer hereby understands and agrees that all articles submitted to and published by a newspaper under this agreement shall be considered works for hire. And further, to the extent any intellectual property right does not pass pursuant to the work for hire doctrine, writer hereby assigns to newspaper all rights to publish the article and all previously submitted articles of writer in any tangible medium of expression now known or later developed, from which it can be perceived, reproduced, or otherwise communicated, either directly or with the aid of a machine or device, including without limitation the rights to archive, republish, edit, repackage, or revise any article in any manner. So, some of these draconian grants of rights clauses would leave you without remedy. If you truly have only given them the one-time right to use it in the original format and in the original publication, then in theory at least, there'd be a potential copyright infringement claim. Now, again, your ability and willingness and business motivation to assert that are different issues, but at least it would give you a basis to come to them, going back to Mark's point about what you really want is a good business relationship. And say, hey guys, wait a minute. Now, this wasn't the deal, and you're taking my work, which you really only bought for one-time use, and now you're profiting off of it, and we're not going to do that anymore. So.
Yeah, I would have to say that I certainly, and I mean, you know your own situation a lot better than I do, and maybe you've enjoyed working with them in the past. But if they're saying to you, not only am I doing this, but I'm going to do it again if I ever have the opportunity. This is not the kind of relationship that is really going to have a lot of future for you, and I cut bait, find somebody else that you can work with.
Or make a better deal with them. Say, look, I don't mind you reselling my stuff, but let me have a piece of the action.
Give me something.
Turn this lemon into lemonade. I'll make you my publishing agent. Go out and find other markets for me.
We see ourselves as, who asked that? Was it you? We see ourselves as victims, as writers too much, in that they have all the power, but you've been hearing this morning how difficult it is to find good writers, and you're a lot harder to replace than you think you are. And they're just testing the waters, and if you take that advice and just say, hey, look, this wasn't the deal, and you don't want to threaten them or anything, but by the same token, you don't want to, what I call, give away your brilliance. And that's what's happening. If you just say, hey, we've got this relationship, boom, 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 a lot of times they'll back down because they don't want to lose you.
Lisa, you had a question on Twitter.
what did I say?
It was you were asking about the ethics of being paid to write for client and cross-posting.
Okay, so if
That ring a bell?
if you work on a piece and it's published, and then you also want to make it part of your own online portfolio, and based on, like, say you run a website and you just keep a running list, is there? I mean, is that something you make part of your contract to let them know, I'm writing this for you, this is yours, but I'm also going to include it on my own website as part of my portfolio? Just wanted to know about that.
Yeah. Well, a couple things. Again, going back to my opening theme, I mean, best thing is to have that issue addressed in your contract. Yeah, I'm assigning you all these rights, but I want you to know I also blog, and I can refer to my own stuff on my own blog. Now, in the absence of an agreement, I do think you can link without fear of copyright infringement, and you certainly can link without fear in the real world of anybody getting mad at you if it's a true link, because you're just driving traffic right back to them. You can get it as a legal issue. You can get into some closer calls if we're framing and deep linking and all that, which is beyond the scope.
Also,
but I mean, just a basic link. On your blog, I wrote this great piece for the Dallas Observer that ran last week. Click here. Nobody's going to be concerned about that. But again, if this is something that we do a lot, and for different articles you've sold to different places, best thing to do is just address it up front.
Yeah, if you also if you didn't just link and you just drop the whole article in there, aren't you might be giving Facebook or some social media some rights to they get rights to distribute it as well. I think you're giving them some interest, so it's much better to link. Linking is sort of the way to go.
Instead of just dropping and saying.
Yeah, if you drop the whole thing and say, here friends, read this, if it's a Facebook might have an interest, sort of a non-royalty, I mean, there's, worldwide interest to, in all the content that's on there.
Yeah.
So don't do that. Some people have some authors have lost.
There could also be some SEO issues in there too, that Google would wind up penalizing you for being in multiple places for, and it just looking like you're spamming your own content.
Yeah.
That would then get it delinked or
pushed down on a search engine. Yeah.
We've got time for one more question. So,
I recently shot something for a major union at an awards show, and my organization, we offered to come in and like shoot the red carpet, do interviews and stuff for free. 30 days after the event, we've already got it up on our website. We've had people doing downloads and everything. They sent me a contract and said they wanted me to fill out a work for hire contract, which in this case, this is 30 days after the fact, and this is not the first time this sort of thing's happened. And when I finally I sent them back going, first of all, if I sign this contract, I'm already going to be in copyright violation because it's on my site as it was part of our verbal agreement. And at first I thought they were going to argue with it, but then they just came back and all I had to do was assign them publication rights to be able to put it in their magazines. But that happens a lot. I mean,
all right, Liz.
How did you?
Well, I mean, I guess. The key thing in your story, of course, was that this was after the fact. It's sort of like, the retroactive off the record deal. It's pretty hard after the fact, unless they have a lot more economic bargaining power than you do, for them to impose too much on you. And if they do, it's because of economic bargaining power, not legal bargaining power. It sounds like this particular case worked out as it should, and that's great. I guess they failed to follow the same advice I'm giving you, is to be clear on the front end what the deal is going to do.
I agree. I mean, it's kind of the same situation as this young lady as well spoke of as well. I mean, is this the kind of people? I mean, nobody's forcing you to sign this contract. Do you want to have other business dealings when this could happen again? If it's an image that they like. Coming in after the fact is just not the way the game is played. But and it's very it seems very coercive, and nobody I'd want to do business with.
It was the third time I'd shot for him too.
Yeah.
We'll give the president the final word and then have our second break.
I just wanted to let you know that if you work for PR firms, many public relations firms and individuals belong to the Public Relations Society of America that has a very strict code of ethics in terms of transparency and disclosure. And if that's any reassurance to you, ask.
The one thing I just, it's easy to be bullied because of the disparity in bargaining power. But I agree with this gentleman right here. Don't short sell your brother.
Well, let's thank our panel once again.